Human rights education and overview. Human rights education. The human rights education is all learning that develops the knowledge, skills, and values of human rights. Human rights education has the strengthening of respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, the full development of the human personality and the sense of its dignity, the promotion of understanding, respect, gender equality, and friendship among all nations, indigenous peoples, and racial, national, ethnic, religious, and linguistic groups. The enabling of all persons to participate effectively in a free society. Human rights education as a human right. Human rights education consists every individual and every organ of society to strive by teaching and education to promote respect for these rights and freedoms. The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights declares that a government may not stand in the way of people learning about their rights. Although human rights literacy is not widespread in the world, some of the students are studying human rights, but most of the people receiving no education formally or informally about human rights. Even human rights activities usually acquire their knowledge and skills by self-teaching and direct experiences. People who do not know their rights are more vulnerable to having them abused and often lack of the language and conceptual framework to effectively educate for them. Growing consensus around the world recognize education for and about human rights as essential. It can contribute the building of free, just and peaceful societies. Human rights education is also increasingly recognized as an effective strategy to prevent human rights abuses. Rights, responsibilities, and action. Integral to learning about one's human rights is learning about the responsibilities that accompany all rights, just as human rights belong to both individual and society as a whole. The responsibility to respect, defend, and promote human rights is both individual and collective. For example, call not only on government to promote human rights, but also on every individual and every organ of society. Human rights education provides the knowledge and awareness needed to meet this responsibility. The responsibilities of all citizens in a democratic society are inseparable from the responsibility to promote human rights. To flourish, for democracy and human rights require people's active participation. Human rights education includes learning the skills of advocacy to speak and act every day in the name of the human rights. Human rights education also provides a basis for conflict resolution and the promote of the social order. The goal of human rights and education about the inherent dignity of all people and their right to be treated with respect. About human rights principles such as universality and interdependence of human rights. About how human rights promote participation in decision making and the peaceful resolution of conflicts. About international law like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights or the Convention on the Rights of the Child. About regional national, state, and local law that reinforce international human rights law. About using rights law to protect human rights and account their actions. About human rights violations such as torture, violence against women, and the social, economic, political, and gender forces which cause them. Human rights should be part of everyone's. Administrators of justice, law enforcement personnel, including police and security forces, lawyers, judges, and prosecutors, other government and legislative officials, member of the legislature, public officials elected and appointed, other professionals, educators, social workers, health professionals, journalists, and media representatives. Organizations, associations, and groups. Women organizations, minority groups, member of the business community, trade unionists, religious leaders, students at all level of the education, migrant workers. Thanks to all.